Welcome to the Pricing for the Planet week. It's day 2. During the first day, we really talked about this concept of monetizing sustainability and transforming green initiative into financial gains. So you know that this week is dedicated about this critical topic, sustainability, where to start and what to do. In day 2, we want to be very pragmatic. We want to talk about market research and market insights. So today I'm super excited to have key leaders and experts around this topic. We will start with some insights from the Google team. So I'm super excited to have some colleagues here with me. Audrey, would you mind maybe introducing yourself? And Audrey, sorry about that. Yeah, Florence. Good point. I think I have two choices, so it was on my right, on my left. So Florence, so sorry about that. Florence, do you mind introducing yourself and maybe sharing a little bit about the data that we can see at Google?
Yes, so I will introduce myself because visibly it is useful this morning. My name is Florence. I'm at Google in the Consumer Insights team. And in that team, we have amazing data to analyze consumer behavior. I'm talking about millions, billions of signals every day that come from everything that is searched on Google and everything that is watched on YouTube. And it's really a great lens into consumer behavior because beyond what people often say, there's also what they actually do. And that's what we're able to see with that data.
And I think on this topic, you have something very interesting, which is a say-do gap.
Yes, exactly. So I was hinting towards it, of course, but we often use declarative data in studies and in research surveys, but it's very funny to confront that to intention data. So what people say in surveys is not always what they actually do when they're alone in front of their computer and searching through the night. So intention data can really bring a lot when we're doing this research, and sustainability is a perfect example. I can just give maybe a quick example, but when we look at meat consumption in France, a lot of the surveys say that people are trying to reduce their meat consumption, that they want to change the way they eat. But actually, when we look at Google data, we see that recipes for meat are still peaking, are still on the rise, whereas vegan and vegetarianism isn't doing so well. So it's we clearly need both worlds to really get a complete picture. And actually, this is also an occasion to say that a lot of this data is readily available on Google Trends. It's a sampled, anonymized version. It's really easy to query. So you guys can all do my job and go check out that data.
Well, doing your job, I'm not sure about that, but I think we can go to Google Trend for sure. One question I had for you was more like, so we are talking about sustainability today. Do you see any trend around, consumption? Are things changing or not really?
Yeah, so indeed, as I was saying, sustainability really embodies a lot of the deeper consumer trends that we see on Google. So the first thing we do when we analyze search queries is looking at words, like what are people searching for, what are the topics that interest them. But I also like to look at how they're searching. And what we see throughout all sectors is that people are searching in a much more personal way, in a much more conversational way. And of course, AIs also bring in that conversational habit. And this makes search queries much longer. People also take that opportunity to share complex thoughts and complex requests. Where this links back to sustainability is that we see that they're what they expect from companies, or the answers they expect, often kind of combine impossible things. Like, I want a secondhand shirt, but I want it delivered the next day at my doorstep. I want a thrift store, but it has to be open now and near me. I want a reusable cup, but it has to be personalized. And I think internet kind of gives us this feeling that we're super powerful and that anything is possible, but it will also make it very complex for companies to answer these contradictory kind of needs.
And while we have you, so we are called Pricing for the Planet. So I have to ask, do you have any insight about prices and price points?
Yeah, so actually, price is one of my favorite words to look at on Google. I feel like it really gives us a sense of where the price tensions kind of lie. So people associate price in many of their queries, in their search queries, and we can see where they're trying to spend and where they're trying to save and splurge based on where they search for prices. So sometimes in tense economical times, you will see that they're worried about the price of basic things, and sometimes they're actually more worried about the prices of luxury or high-end items. And it shows how they're kind of distributing their budgets. So you can also do that on Google Trends. And I think an interesting trend that is really a deep trend that we've seen for years and worldwide is the word cheap going down year after year, actually. Yes, I see you're surprised. Whereas the word best, so maybe the quality aspect is going up. So I do think that in general, consumers have understood that they need to look for the best kind of price quality proposal and not just cheap price items. But these behaviors change every day, so that's why my job is just interesting every day, because you'll have to call me back next year.
Yeah, I will. No, perfect. Thanks a lot, Audrey. No, I'm kidding. Thanks a lot, Florence. It's really interesting, and it's one of the value proposition of this event is to really talk about what to do and where to start. And I think starting at Google Trends is a great way to start this, at least thinking about sustainability. Now I think we will go one level down to really like deep, heavy research. Noel, no, I'm kidding. Luc.
Exactly, Luc.
Luc, so you are partner at Simon-Kucher. Would you mind explaining what you've done in terms of research, especially around this new book that you published, The Demand Revolution?
Yeah. So I'm Luc Anfray. I'm a partner at Simon-Kucher. Simon-Kucher is a global strategy consulting firm, and basically we just released a new book that's called The Demand Revolution, and stemming from the fact that we see more and more need from our clients to work on sustainability, and both in terms of pricing, but in terms also of business models and how it impacts the way the companies are evolving and are, I would say, rethinking the strategy. So we wanted to release that book because we think there's we kind of right now are at a crossroad where there's potential investments, potential time to move for the companies, and in the book we wanted to illustrate the changing needs of the consumers, and I think it goes exactly with what you were saying, right? We see that more and more consumers are looking for the sustainability when they purchase things. So I'm talking about the end consumers, right? The consumers that buy day to day, the groceries or clothes or stuff like that, and when we ask them, 78%, for example, from a large sample of 800, so not the billions you have in Google of data, but 8,000 people told us that 78% of them look at sustainability as a key purchasing criteria before making a decision. So obviously price is still important, the product is still important, but sustainability is having a more and more preponderant role nowadays, right? And we see that moving, and we see that evolution going forward with more and more companies being impacted by that. And what's also super important is that in the research we did, there's a question of loyalty and alignment with the brands, and clearly this is also a key factor for the consumers. They're looking and they're really very much more loyal to the brands that are really, I would say, proving sustainability. So there's another question, which is the trust you have in the brand, obviously. But we see that is changing, and the key question for us as strategy consultants is, how do you adapt to that? How do you put forward different claims to the consumers, to the clients? And on my side, I'm also working with companies that are more upstream into the value chain. I would say the raw materials producers and so on. And there's also a key question for them on those changing needs from the customers downstream, and how to integrate that upstream, and how to negotiate, I would say, with the different levels within the value chain, and trying to recover the margin, because there are investments at stake also in that chain. So super important, and really we see, I would say from the last 3 years, we see really things moving. I would say I started some time ago in sustainability. I did a master in research in sustainability, I would say almost 20 years ago. And at that time, sustainability was very satellite to the companies, right? It was, I mean, there were some early movers or very early movers that were positioned on that, but it was not that systemic. And nowadays we see that more and more companies are, having more claims on sustainability and so on. And key question for us as strategy and pricing consultants is, can you monetize that advantage, right? And there's always also a key question on timing. So depending on how your industry is moving and your competitors are moving, do you have an advantage? Can you monetize? Can you offer a new solution to the clients? Can you monetize that? Or is it, I would say, an hygiene factor that allows you to stay in the competition? And so there's always that, that trade-off in between pricing and also maintaining the market shares, gaining market shares eventually. And as we said, clients are more loyal if you are, I would say, true to yourself and true to your positioning in terms of sustainability. So super interesting for us to obviously, I would say, probe that and get a feel from the consumers, but also integrating that into the research and the strategy decisions we can recommend to our clients, right? So clearly it's a demand revolution, I would say, in terms of how we adapt, how we move forward, and clearly, I think that we'd have a tremendous impact in the coming years. So that's clearly a theme you need to invest on, and I guess we'll discuss also more practical things to test. But one key message to the companies or to the actors that would be listening is it's never too late, and you need to go on the market and try and prove it, right? So super important not to analyze too much, but really important to confront your ideas to the markets, to the clients, to the consumers, to make sure that they're efficient, they're well positioned, and so on.
And Luc, one question, because so yesterday the audience and I had the chance to sit down with Nikolai, who published this book, and I think one concept that was very interesting was Nikolai explaining that I think you design it's 8 types of clients.
Yeah.
And somehow they are all related to sustainability.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they all want to pay more for sustainability, but I think all of them has some strong feeling about sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. Well, as we're consultants, we did the matrix, right? The 2x2 matrix. We position the clients and so on, but I always keep the details. And what's super interesting is that basically, among the sample that we've asked, 85% of the consumers, of the customers, are interested into sustainability. And as you said also, there's always that question of, are we prepared to pay for sustainability? And it's not black and white; it's shades of gray, right? And we see there are what we call sustainability champions. They are willing to pay for sustainability. There are others which are willing to pay, but depending on the occasion, they're willing to pay if it's, for example, only beauty products, if it's only selected products. So again, and we have 8 different groups, right? So again, the clear positioning for our clients is to understand who you sell to, right? And are your customers willing to pay? Do you know them? Can you make sure that they trust you, that you have the right proof points, and obviously make sure your offer matches the needs of the customers. That's common sense, but that's always something we tend to forget in the corporate world sometimes.
No, perfect. And Luc, what I'm hearing, it's really, and from Florence's point and your point, it's like we are talking about sustainability. Mm-hmm. A lot of the work involved around sustainability will be to get smarter, to be more like granular on like your clients, what they are expecting, what they want, the different trends. I think that's really like a new responsibility for companies to get involved, around those topics, which is a good transition because I'm super excited to have Decathlon and to have Noel and working for Decathlon. I have to admit, I'm always quoting Decathlon for the work that you are doing around We Play Circular and all the work that you are doing around second-hand products. So super excited to have your point of view. We talked about kind of like very high level, shoppers information from Google. We talked about all the heavy work that the Simon-Kucher team did. I know you did a conjoint analysis with EpicConjoint. Would you mind sharing like the journey? Why did you do a conjoint analysis, and what was kind of the output? And maybe first, can you introduce yourself, Noel?
Sure. Thank you. So my name is Noel. I'm the Global Director for Pricing and Promotion Strategy for Decathlon. And as you can expect, a lot of what I have to do is to find a good balance between how we position ourselves in terms of pricing, but also how do we serve the, let's say, the overarching goals of being sustainable. And maybe let me start with that before jumping into the study itself. We have a very strong commitment to the planet and to the people. What we stand for really is to make people move through the wonders of sport. And internally, I think that was the very, let's say, very significant change of the recent years, which is to align people, we need to make sure they are incentivized to follow. So we are probably one of the still two rare companies that really put, our money where our mouth is. So we have a very strong incentive structure that is really driven by sustainability. So that is the first very important thing I think people need to know about, how we address the topic. Then when it comes to the research itself, we've done something very, let's say, specific. We wanted to know one thing: how much are people willing to pay, more or less, according to different claims that we have around sustainability. And we wanted also to have a panorama not only about ourselves, but also around different brands that people can shop from. And so far, I think we figure out that there's a lot of what we have discussed already, a conflict between what people want and what they actually can afford, which is something very important to us because Decathlon still stands for accessibility, right? So we know that this is a very strong dilemma we'll have to solve at some point. What we have seen also is that there tend to be different level of sustainability and how they ring, as in terms of importance to consumers. Typically, what we have figured out is the closer it is to people, when people can actually physically, visually, really relate to the point is more important. So we have example coming from other industries like, personal care. Things you can put on your skin tends to be very, very, very important when it comes to, their healthiness, their sustainability aspect, and so on. What we have found of interest also during this study was that something like local production was also very important to our respondent. And somehow the connection here is to say things I can see that really impact my daily life, my comfort every day, will have an importance. On the other side, what we have also understood is that sometimes too much is just too much. So we need to keep it simple. There tends to be some sign of a fatigue in the way we addressed the study, meaning that at some point it almost felt like people were getting bored to be asked or pinged around some aspect of sustainability. Like you can relate, right? If someone would come to ask you some question 10 times on the same topic, probably by the end of the day, you tend to have a negative reaction to the point because you have been oversensitized on that. So you need to find the fine balance that is sufficient to still, put it in the eye of the customer, trying to educate them in some way about why this is important, but not going too far so that they reject it. With that being said, we have been able to, model different willingness to pay. We have been able to model different segments. So I think when it comes to the profile that Luc was mentioning, it's very important to realize that not everybody will have the same willingness to pay. For some people, that would be a clearly, a showstopper or a no-go when a company doesn't have any credible proposal to put on the table. For others, it's really felt as a nice to have, and as long as there's no additional price to pay for it, they are happy to select, the sustainable offer over the non-sustainable offer. The way we address it in our everyday life in Decathlon is that we want to put our size at work here. So we have things internally that we call, for example, eco-design, that today stand for almost 40% of our sales. So eco-design is basically an internal measure of improvement, which means the product we have now is a better version when it comes to the planet compared to what we have before. So yes, it's not an industry standard, but it was something that is first an internal measure of how we track that we become better on this field. So 40% actually of our product have undergone some substantial improvement in the way they are produced. So that's something we potentially haven't cracked the way we really have to market it to consumer, but it's something that is first important for us internally. And the reason I'm mentioning that is when you realize the size of Decathlon. The size of Decathlon is helping us bring this sustainability aspect to the masses. And I think this is the way that intuitively we have thought was the best way to do. So people are asking, often, why don't you create a sustainable range versus a non-sustainable range? Well, that really contradicts with our DNA. So for us, I think we're trying to solve I think we call it the quadrancy. There was a framework where some industrial professionals, pricing consultants were saying, well, maybe we should find a way, to lower cost by kind of subsidizing the people who are not happy to pay, the willingness to pay, by sourcing it from the people who are happy to pay it. Well, we are participating in that in the sense that we are doing the job first so that consumer can afford it.
Super interesting. And one question, because, it's definitely, best-in-class approach to do those kind of analysis. Like, how are you using those kind of insights in your pricing operation, like day to day? Like, did you find that after this research, you will be more precise on your go-to-market and pricing strategy? Or is it more like overall to take big decision, like changing your business model, for example?
In this particular study, because it is also very, let's say, it's very specific to a certain product nature, right? So we did a study about white cotton t-shirt. And you can say, okay, that's maybe not as significant. Well, clothing is, I think, in the top 2, maybe top 3 most polluting industry in the planet, right? So that's why it was so important to try to crack the mental code around this kind of product. And that definitely is going to lead to different steps in the way we're going to bring that to the market. Because what we have here is intention. And yes, the method of conjoint is trying to be very subtle about what you're actually testing. This is what makes the value. So it's not direct declaration. It's more about decoding your intention. But then we have a second phase, which is, okay, let's put that into a market test where we can really validate that beyond people's intention and declaration, or even, let's say, inner preferences. We do see that reflected in the sales, because at the end, yes, the friction about sustainability and growth is a real one. It's a really, really big one, potentially less for us than for companies that are listed on the stock market. So we are a privately owned company, which means that we can agree between ourselves that we want to do it. So that's the first thing. We need to go with a real test, which is also going to highlight one thing. What happens if we, at Decathlon, standing for sustainability, open up the door for competition to step in, right? Because at the end, we are hopefully a beloved brand and retailer, but we do not create the market. We not decide what the market do, how they are going to react, how competitors are going to react. And I think that points out the key aspect of all of it, which is even if we know what we should be doing individually, it will not work because we are all going to be locked into a prisoner dilemma kind of thing, where the first one to move is going to open up a bridge for other people to step in. And then I'm not going to mention the Chinese retailers who might take advantage of the situation, but it is clearly what we have seen over the last few years. So I think from a regulation perspective, at some point, this is helping us basically putting a business case and say, okay, for society, we're going to do our part. We are stepping on cost. We are doing whatever we can also in terms of innovation, product research, component research, but we need to have some help. So that's some element that goes beyond pricing, but really comes to corporate strategy and also trying to secure some help from legislation to advance. Now, on the other aspect, we also realize that, especially for our customers, but for more and more customers, across the place, we need to make sure that when we mention eco offer, people also understand ecological offer, of course, but also economical offer. It's been very, very hard, actually, not to find a way where people were happy to dissociate these two things. So the way we address it at Decathlon is also to revisiting how we can go to market. Is that going to be through selling new product only? Well, not really, because there's also a macro trend behind it, which is the rise of the second-hand product, consumer to consumer, but also through other retailers. So we're also trying to take advantage of that, also taking advantage of the fact that we control the whole value chain, so we can find opportunity for cost to be efficient in a different aspect. So we have also a business of, we have proper circular business models like rental, buyback, subscription, and so on. And in this area, we're probably going to have to do even more research and more in-market test. So far, we're trying to test consumer response to that. To be honest, we still have to work really the financials behind to understand what is the consequences for us if it were becoming a major part of our business. But this is also showing the commitment we have to really, really go deep in this area.
And I think you were part of the first company who claimed publicly like the value of having a circular business model. Because I think with the We Play Circular approach, I think Luc was saying that from a profitability point of view, it was, so it's a big like range, but it was saying it's between 3 and 10 times more profitable for the firm. So I think it's a very good message that Decathlon sent to the marketplace. Like, you can be good, you can do good things for the planet and for the society while having, a good, bottom line and top line effect for the company.
Yeah, I mean, what is required is also to figure out, how are we going to be organized in the long run if we really move a substantial part of our business in this new business model and so on. I think the easiest part is what we have done so far, which is really looking into a component, right? You need to change some source of, of supply. Potentially, you find a way to do the packaging more efficient and so on. So you can work out the existing, but then you have to transformation. And so I was talking about circular business, for instance. So circular business is still a minor part of our business today, right? The way I look into it personally, that's my personal view, is that we are still in the infancy of that. Yeah. Like a lot of other corporate stories, when you are a startup, you can do it very well because you have everything under control. The moment you need to become bigger, the scale-up phase can really create a lot of new challenges. That also could include the impact on the human organizations, because our people so far, they are sellers, they are conceptors, they are people who they design product, they sell product, they're in stores and so on. But they're going to have different skill set tomorrow if the business model is really changing. Yeah. Right.
Which is perfect transition, Noel. Thank you so much. Because I think for Florence, no, I'm kidding, for Audrey, we would love to wrap up and say really like this topic today is really to talk about, where to start and what to do. Can you share maybe your advice on like I have a startup or I have a big company. I want to be more sustainable. I don't know where to start.
That's a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question.
So I'm Audrey Courant. I'm a managing principal at Carlisle, and we're a market research and consulting company. But our specificity is that we work in industrial B2B sectors. So quite different difficulties, I would say, or challenges to know what the market wants, heavily driven by regulations when we talk about sustainability. But not only, and this is changing also. So the first thing, there are indeed some priorities to tackle when you want to become more sustainable or launch a sustainable product or make your current product evolve to becoming more sustainable. And the first one is to, and I think a lot of us talked about it, but is really to go and listen and hear your customers and talk in depth to your customers before even talking about willingness to pay or these type of topics. It's okay. So what does sustainability mean for you as a client, as a customer, when it relates to this market
this group of product or this group of solution. Because what we've seen in these industrial sectors where we play in is that there's a ton of topics around a product and a solution that can be perceived as being sustainable. The product itself, what is the share of recycled material in the product, of biomaterials potentially, but also the process of manufacturing this product, the water consumption, the energy consumption, the waste management during the manufacturing of the product. And then what about the afterlife, if we can call it, of the product? Is there a second life planned or possible? Is it interesting for the client to have a second life for the product? A take-back programs for the older product when you replace with new ones? So, long story short, you don't really know when you talk to your customers about a sustainable product, what he or she is going to think about, what will resonate with them. So really what we always advise our client before anything else is to have in-depth discussions with their clients, prospects, of course, to really understand what resonates with them, what would bring benefits with them, where do they, see these benefits. So yeah, really the first step. And in B2B industrial sectors, this is relatively tough because you don't have this big data that you have from Google. You have limited access to panels and quantitative samples. So it's usually really well targeting different groups and different segments. And I think a lot of you also said it. The answers to these questions about what does sustainability mean to my client is going to change a lot depending on the country you're targeting and you're looking into, the segment, the activity of your client, and that is also super important to identify. So I would say that's really the first and maybe the most important thing to look at.
And then, so there is one, I got this question all the time. And I think for you, it's easy because you are, doing that all the time. But a lot of people are coming to us at Pricing for the Planet and say, well, I get it. I need to start with market research. But for them, market research is this kind of like big thing. And is it a conjoint analysis? Is it, like a survey that I should send? Can you maybe, explain a little bit, the nitty-gritty of what's behind market research?
Totally. So for this first phase that I was mentioning, usually we don't use we try to understand the customer journey, we try to understand the customer needs, their behaviors, etc., which will drive then their perception or their answers towards what is sustainability. After that, so as I said, that was for us, it's really the first priority. But after that, there are two other things that you need to do in terms of market research that at least we recommend to doing to our clients is one, and especially for pricing, it's one, gathering the competitive pricing because you want to know, what's the current market, where is your environment, where are your competitors, and then you want to indeed potentially measure the price sensitivity and the willingness to pay. And for that, you can use conjoint analysis. We talked about it, which is a very good market research method, I would say, because it puts the respondent. I'm going to give a little bit of details about it. Maybe some know, of course, in the pricing industry, but it puts the respondent or your client, your prospect, in a trade-off, in a choice situation. So you're not asking them what would you prefer between, or what this and that is important, but more, okay, between product 1, 2, 3, 4 that has these different characteristics, which one would you choose? And by repeating this choice several times, you then understand really where they put their value to which characteristic of the product. So that's one very interesting method. It is, especially in B2B, sometimes a method that's not easy to put in place because it has some complexity. So sometimes instead, and sometimes coupled with conjoint, we also do we use another method that's called Van Westendorp. A little bit simpler, but it's declarative this time. So we ask the client, what would be a price where, for a given product that we, of course, define very well, what would be a price where the product would be too expensive for even being considered? What would be the price where what would be the price, the level or price at which the product would be, considered too cheap. It's not enough expensive. The product's probably too cheap. I'm not going to consider it. And then 2 intermediary points: one where it's considered a good bargain, and one the product is considered maybe potentially expensive, but still interesting to be considered. And then we look at the intersections of the too expensive curve and the not expensive enough, or too cheap, if we can say it, curve. And that's what we call the optimal price point. And that is the price point. And of course, you need to get that also by customer segment or country or whatever is, of interest, and to identify differences, because there will be differences. But this optimal price point is the price point that maximizes the potential adoption of your product and solution. So that's another type of research that we use, especially in B2B, when sometimes conjoint is a little bit more complex to put in place.
Do you see a shift? Because I think, as pricing people, we hear a lot about, Gabor Granger, those kind of like market research, conjoint analysis. But what we see at Pricing for the Planet, we see a shift from, mostly like pricing people, like monetization teams, to chief sustainability officer, like chief value officer that, start this transformation by, doing exactly what you described, like, hey, let's do something, let's get smarter about our client. Do you see that happening or not yet?
So in these industrial, sectors where we are, there are some, slight movement there, but I don't think most of these industries, not all of them, but most of these industries are still, are starting to tackle the topic of sustainability and trying to gain value or understand, the value of the sustainability. So usually we still work mostly with marketing groups. However, so these are the type of, our direct clients, but usually they do involve some people that has some responsibility around sustainability within the group to be part of, have an eye in the project.
And maybe opening the same question for the group, do you see kind of this shift of more like sustainability teams or groups reaching out to you or reaching out to, consulting firms to figure out what is my market, what are my segments, should I change the way I'm thinking about my clients?
Maybe I can jump in on this one. And typically in the B2B sectors, what we also see, not internally but externally, we also see a difference in terms of stakeholders you address, right, in your client company. So basically, you were discussing before, I would say, in a commoditized environment, you were discussing with the purchasing department of your client. And now the sustainability is adding another layer of complexity, and you need to involve the R&D of the client, and other persons concerned with the process. So that's also an option for more differentiation, and I would say renewing the discussion you're having with your clients, right? So you're not only the supplier of that commodity, of that product, but you're also providing solutions to the client. And that's where I guess there's a question on how do I tap into that value that I'm delivering to the client? And then how can I change my business model, right? So do I keep, I would say, selling the product in the same ways, or do I change the way I sell it? It can be very basic, from, I would say, renewing the sales pitch and training the sales force to make sure that they're buying into the value they deliver, and then they can argument it to the clients. And it's also, as you were saying, Noel, it's also maybe changing the way you sell and basically transition to more économie de la fonctionnalité, so functionality economy, and saying, I deliver a value, and what's the best way, what's the best price model or revenue model to grasp that value and make sure that we have a fair share with our clients. So yes, clearly this is something we see, and there's a lot going along in terms of transformation of the companies. And as we were saying, it's not something that happens overnight, right? So you need to embark all the different departments, all the different divisions of your company, but also on your client side, in the B2B, in the B2B sector.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So on the B2B side, I think we've spoken a lot about numbers today and prices and what's the right price. But another way to act on the price tag is to make the product more desirable. And we need new numbers, we need new KPIs, but we also need new words to talk about these products, what they bring. And that's something we see also in the way people search online, searching for maybe it's not secondhand, but maybe it's pre-loved, pre-owned, second life. And I think that also participates in making it more desirable and can help work on that price tag.
Same thing. Like, do you see a shift, especially because you are super advanced at Decathlon?
Well, we can see that from different perspectives, right? Internally, we have a chief sustainability officer who joined us less than 2 years ago, I think. So that is, something really significant. The sustainability team is basically working across the full value chain. So I was talking about eco-design before, but so basically how we're going to get eco-conception, how we're going to make our existing product better first, but also we have, we make advancement also inside the marketing part of it. So how do we understand first what value means to people, to our customers? How do we show them how we do it internally? So we are really working, I would say, on the 360 perspective about, how we should address our consumer needs. And then the consumer needs change over time. During COVID, for example, the rise of second-hand product, pre-loved, pre-owned, and so on, was very significant. I think it took everyone by surprise almost with the pace it had. And now what we see is that for some of these people, there's no coming back, right? They want to stay in that type of consumption habit. They find it very high value because you get products that are, more, more affordable and still very nice, which is also proving the quality of the product and the brand over time, which is also something interesting to observe. And we want to, we want to find a way where we can align our financial requirements and our human perspective on business. So we're also trying to see what role we could play in this with these consumers who have changed their consumption habit. So exploration is a big thing, of course. And exploration, to be successful, needs to be, of course, monitored, analyzed, but also protected. So there's a lot of things in the way I think about it, where I see a lot of similarities also with, inventors. And when you give innovators the protection of a patent, for example, so we can tell them it's safe to develop. I'm still trying to figure out what is the equivalent we could have internally and also on the broader market perspective to people who are trying to innovate on their business model.
Oh.
That's very interesting. Because, I had a question and I was curious to have your opinion. We are working a lot with Imperial College in London about this concept of like material as a service. And it's like you are Stellantis, you are manufacturing a car, you don't buy the aluminium anymore, but you lease this aluminium directly from the mining producer. And it's creating a very interesting thing. It's like now you have a financial incentive to create like a car that you can recycle, that you will monitor where your car is, that you will get the car back at the end of the life cycle, and then you will disassemble it and bring it back to the producer of aluminium. Those kind of like a new business model, are you seeing those things emerging, or it's still too early? I don't know who has...
Those are questions that are emerging. I mean, back to your point, it's a question of timing and who makes the first move, right? And in terms of, you're sitting on a value pool, I would say, that's existing. And you have anticipation, so now it will either thrive or eventually be more competitive and be potentially pressurized, right? And then it's up to the companies to I would say build the potential, the solutions, and then trigger them when it's needed, right? So, and when it's needed, for me, it's a question of my competitors, as we said, but also the regulations and the, I would say, the forces at stake in the value chain, right? So it's not a simple. There's no simple question, right? Saying we need to move first, but clearly that's an area that a lot of companies are investigating. Some are a bit more advanced than others, obviously.
I think, in this example you were giving, I think there's also a moment where you need to achieve a critical mass. So there's a platform effect to it. I'm just taking Vinted as an example. Vinted has been there for, 15 years, I think. That's what I looked. I think this is what I found on Google. So if it's wrong, I'm sorry.
I'm sure it's right.
It was so Vinted is not actually something that happened to to come into the world during COVID. But until then, it was, I wouldn't say confidential, but that would be wrong. It was not the massive mainstream success that it has become, which means that at some point, that's the whole point about, protecting innovators, because you know that the journey can be very long and very flat at the beginning. And the moment it really succeeds, it can go very fast. But you need to have this incubation period, basically, to get there. If a business model is, really promising, figuring out what are the conditions of success for that business model really become the new norm. So it really is also, engagement from the consumer to do some effort at first, looking weird by selling back your old stuff until it becomes the new norm.
It's super interesting because, it's one of the things we are talking a lot about, like, you need to work with regulators, you need to work with, your local governments. And I never thought about, how you protect those new business models. How do you consider those companies as innovators? And then so you have to protect them. So that could be maybe there is something to organize, for Brussels or Washington, and see how we can work with the government there to figure out something. Because I know there is a lot of laws and regulation around circularity, for example, about reusability, but and maybe I'm wrong, but I've never heard anything about how do we protect these innovators. So if there is someone in the audience working, at Washington or Paris or Brussels, reach out. We are happy to help. Maybe as a wrap up, last question, do you have any advice on, any company willing to invest in sustainability and they don't know where to start? What would be your advice?
Segmentation. I think I would really echo what we have talked about today, which is sustainability is a very wide definition so far. But for your customers, it can be very, very precise. Figuring that is the key, is the first thing, right? There's nothing worse than to work a lot to put together a very nice proposition and actually the person say, well, actually, I'm sorry. This is not meaningful to me.
Yeah, and as a segue to that, back to words again, when we see how people search about sustainability, it's very simple words, very simple actions. It's everyday simple actions. And companies still tend to use largely big concepts, targets in the future, dates, and we can see there's a disconnect there in the semantics. So I think simple words, simple actions are also the place to start. And you can also watch my webinar that you will post after. So that's another place to start.
I will mention that. Luc, maybe?
Yeah, maybe one analogy we can make, that's also something we do when we talk about AI and the different use cases. And typically when we work with companies, the idea is to work hand in hand and identify what could be the good use cases, right? And select a few use cases to make sure you invest, and then you prove the concept, right? So it's always very difficult to go for the full-fledged solution and so on. So be very pragmatic. Again, depending on your company, whether you have the push or the mandate from the CEO, it's super clear and you can invest, or if you need to prove that and make sure there's a case. But for me, what's super interesting is to mobilize internally to see what are the good use cases, align collectively, and then select one or two use cases and set a deadline saying, we have 6 months, 1 year, or whatever to work on that. And then forward, we'll discuss, depending on the results, on the outcomes. So super important to be, I would say, pragmatic and very prudent there.
Yeah, I would completely agree. For me, all that we've just said is just listen to your customers and your prospects. And from, very early in the process, so before you even or you have an idea, but you don't know exactly what you're going to push in the market, first start there and then develop, as you just said, Luc, some, unique value propositions and then test them, and see which one resonates the most. So all this is basically listening to your clients and hearing them. Yeah.
And you mentioned, Luc, that was super interesting and it's a big passion of mine. It's like you mentioned AI. It's funny because, of course, you have two Googlers here. No, but interesting. And I'm glad we have Decathlon because, so of course, at Google, we always got those questions about AI. Is it good or bad for the planet? And I'm always using the same example. It's from Decathlon because my big thing is like AI is an enabler. And the reason I'm saying that is AI is an enabler if you want to do a circular business model, you took at Decathlon, you need to buy old product. How do you calculate the price of an old product that you need to figure out how much you will sell it first? So you need to forecasting capabilities, and then you need to forecast all the costs related to remanufacturing this product, like stocking this product, shipping this product to a different store. And I think it's a perfect example of where AI is enabling you to have a circular business model, because there is no way 10 years ago you could have done that. So I don't know if you have an opinion. I know it's a question from like going from nowhere, but like happy to get your perspective on this one.
Noel, do you want to go ahead? Or
Yeah, well, I was not expecting to talk about
big disclaimer
in detail.
That was not in the script.
No,
So
we hadn't one. No, I think it's very interesting because when it comes to AI, and again, it's one of these things that needs to be defined, right? When you talk about AI, it's that Gen AI, etc., and so on. I think in this one, it's about predicting a deeper, what we call, let's say, a multi-factored scenario, right? We're talking about buyback price, sale price. We have other criteria, of course, because in this setup, at some point, we also become the owner of that inventory. And as any company with inventory has a cost, right? We also need to take that into account. So AI helps us figure out basically various scenarios, and it is something that helps inform the decision. So far, we are not asking the AI to take the decision, which is a good thing so far. And I think when it comes to AI, we also need to make sure that at first we need to tell the AI what is the target and the goal, because otherwise you're going to optimize for things that are not that interesting or not really aligned with your core values. And it's probably, the AI models we have can probably tell us we can be even more successful and bigger as a company if we increase the price by X% on this range and basically optimize everything. But I think what AI is not really good at for now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would be happy to, is predicting what is the long-term impact of doing certain things, right? I think AI is good at optimizing what we have here and now. But when it comes to what does it mean for us 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, this is still a senior executive decision to open up the way.
Yeah. And 100%, I think there is a lot of research on that. And I think you probably seen the launch of this company around spatial AI. And I think that's exactly where they are going into this simulation. So we will be able to recreate the world, and then we can simulate like, what if we do that? What if we do that? But that's not like a real use case right now, but I think it will happen.
Maybe to complete what we're saying, I think I see AI as a resource, right, to the companies. And so the key question for me is to have an holistic view on the company and how do you use resources, right? And you need also to be using AI with sobriety and make sure that, as you were saying, there might be use cases that are not super relevant, right? So there's a question of how you can optimize and make sure that you combine AI, you combine sustainability, you have those discussions on scope 3 and how you can, positively impact overall the planet, basically, right?
Yeah, all good. Well, a huge thank you for your time. Sorry about the non-scripted questions.
No worries. It's always
Thank you very much.
And for the audience, a huge thank you. Just as a reminder, so part of day 2, you have 2 other webinars. You will be lucky to spend, half an hour with Florence to really talk about more the details about the data that we got from Google. So again, thank you so much. So Florence recorded that yesterday, so that's why we are making some internal jokes. And then we have another very interesting discussion with Michel Scholz. He created the True Pricing Foundation. If you don't know yet what is true pricing, you will learn everything from this webinar. So I strongly suggest you go watch this webinar, and it will be it for day 2. And we will see you tomorrow for the day 3. Again, thank you so much for your time and for your interest.